Hello everyone, welcome to the episode that deals with the techniques of translation. In this episode, we will talk about the types and techniques of translation. To make the learners understand the topic meticulously, we shall also discuss the meaning, need, purpose and significance of translation. As we all know that the need of translation is growing day by day. So in this episode, we are going to talk about it extensively. I am Sakshi Mandwal and a subject expert for today's topic is Ms. Sabah Tariq, lecturer for English at Jamia Hamdard University. After watching this episode, the student will be able to understand accurate meaning of translation, to realize the significance of translation, to appreciate the growing need and purpose of translation, to expand and improve the skills of translating any type of text into another target language correctly by using the appropriate technique and method of translation. What is translation? Translation is the process in which a written communication or a text in first language is produced as the written communication or text in the second language, interpreting the same meaning. Here the text in the first language is the source text and the equivalent text that communicates the same message is the target text or translated text. Initially, translation had been a manual activity. Today, together with the manual translation, there is also machine translation or computer assisted translation, which use computers as an aid to translation. Translation is one way to bringing the world closer. Origin of the term. Etymologically, translation refers to bringing across or carrying across. Originated from the Latin word translatio, the perfect passive participle of which is translatum or transfer. Here, trans implies to transfer and fere implies to carry or bring across. For the modern Roman, German and Slavic European languages, the word tradcure is used for translation, which implies to bring across or to lead across in English. The Greek term for translation is metaphrasis, which implies speaking across. Metaphrase implies a word-for-word translation or literal translation, while paraphrase in Greek implies a saying in other words. An individual or a computer program that renders a text into another language is called a translator. The discipline concerned with issues related to the production of translations is called translation studies. Need of translation. Translation is one of the most critical jobs in modern society. As the whole globe is coming together based on information sharing and communicative advances, it is only natural that there has been a constant demand and an unprecedented need for translation of ideas from one language to another. Translation plays a vital role in the performance of international companies and governments alike. We have had incidences in human history where entire wars were initiated just because of misinterpretations and business relations severed due to failure of communications. Translation is no longer just the process of translating words, but has evolved into the transformation of meaning and intentions. Here we have listed some points relating to significance of translation. Significance of translation. Vital for multinationals. For companies which operate in multiple countries, translation is inevitable. Sometimes they need to pass information or collect data from all the employees or branches across the world. In this scenario, it is necessary that they translate the information to and fro. Moreover, in scenarios where they need to negotiate terms with international governments or other local companies for tie-ups, they need to have proper translation of proposals and demands. External affairs of a nation. In today's world, international diplomacy is the most important of all external affairs. Many a times, the world leaders are expected to present their ideas on situations arising in other parts of the world. It is important that those ideas are translated properly when expressed, else they can result in major catastrophes. Moreover, international dialogues on different matters rest heavily on successful translation. Cultural interchange. Translation of various art forms like music, films and literature from a region is necessary for global understanding of a region and its life. The plight of Palestine refugees, the poverty in Brazilian streets, the colorful life in Spanish cities, and the myths and legends of ancient India are spreading across the world, riding on the shoulder of good translation. Translated films and subtitled films generate more revenue for global film industry, while translated music and literature provides added royalties to the artists. Recognition from the world stage and international fame is an added bonus. Transfer of news. World events can only be transmitted accurately if the correct information is received by news agencies. This involves proper translation of news coming from local bodies and regional centers. Unless proper translation is done, the news will be ambiguous and unreliable. An example for this can be seen when the government of China recently banned international news agencies from entering local regions for covering a major problem. However, information was still passed on to the world. Insiders covered all the important news, which was later translated and presented to the world. For the realization of global village. The global citizenship can only be achieved through sharing and caring. We need to be able to communicate our ideas and thoughts without delay or ambiguity. Different people around the world use different languages and are most comfortable handling their online activities in their own regional languages. But they translate their thoughts in English so that global friends can understand them. To boost tourism. Tourists around the world complain of being shortchanged and tricked as they are unfamiliar with the destinations. The primary reason for such negative experiences is the absence of proper translation. When we can offer proper translation to tourists along with genuine guidance, we assure the quality of our region as a tourist-friendly destination and ensure success. This not only makes the country as a popular tourist destination, but also helps in increasing the revenue of the country, and the country as a whole. Apart from this, the world economy is dominated with businesses where marketplace is filled with international companies. And this is the reason why translating languages has become an important part of the contemporary business. Without these services, there will be a lot of barrier for people from different parts of the world to communicate and understand each other. With confusion, there will be chaos, and it can lead to loss of sales and business. In the 21st century, translating languages is one of the most demanding professions that provide complete solution for businesses. Since trading necessitates interaction amongst nations, every day there is a huge need for all organizations working on foreign clients and foreign products to access translation service. Thanks to the growing companies offering these services, making communication gap lesser and for making understanding each other better. These are not only helpful for organizations but to individuals as well. If you are a foreign student or you need to translate your legal documents to be used in different countries, then translating them to other tongue can solve a lot of problems and can make work faster. With translation method, you can easily convert any document such as birth certificate, marriage certificate, deed of sale and more to your needed international language. Understanding and being able to read what a document says can bring numerous advantage and endless of opportunities to everyone. With businesses, translation companies, it is now easier to access internationally if you know what the other persons in other countries are speaking. If you are planning to have an import or export business, then transacting with people in India or in Italy will be easier if you have access to translation. Now expanding your business and hitting the global market is now easier than ever. Of course, running a business globally means you are able to transact and close a deal to buy or sell products and services abroad. Selling indicates you are able to market effectively, and language is a vital tool for informing your target customers what you can offer. One way of advertising your campaigns is through the use of leaflets, brochures, web page, etc. Converting languages to foreign tongue is a necessity, so you can present your products and services better without confusion and misunderstanding. Purpose of translation. Translation typically has been used to transfer written or spoken SL text to equivalent written or spoken TL text. In general, the purpose of translation is to reproduce various kinds of texts, including religious, literary, scientific, and philosophical texts in another language, and thus making them available to wider readers. If languages were just a classification for a set of general or universal concepts, it would be easy to translate from a SL to a TL. Furthermore, under the circumstances, the process of learning an L2 would be much easier than it actually is. In this regard, Color 1976 believes that languages are nomenclatures and the concepts of one language may differ radically from those of another, since each language articulates or organizes the world differently. And languages do not simply name categories, they articulate their own. The conclusion likely to be drawn from what Color 1976 writes is that one of the troublesome problems of translation is the disparity amongst languages. The bigger the gap between the SL and the TL, the more difficult the transfer of message from the former to the latter will be. The difference between an SL and a TL and the variation in their cultures makes the process of translation a real challenge. Approaches to translation. 1. Formal equivalence. It implies word-for-word translation. Formal equivalence corresponds to 2. Dynamic or functional equivalence. In this, we do not follow word-for-word translation, but we keep on changing, adding or subtracting from the original text to make it look as the translator sees fit. Dynamic equivalence corresponds to paraphrase. Dynamic equivalence or functional equivalence conveys the essential thoughts expressed in a source text, if necessary at the expense of literality, original sememe and word order, the source text active versus passive voice, etc. By contrast, formal equivalence, sought via literal translation, attempts to render the text literally or word for word, the latter expression being itself a word-for-word rendering of the classical Latin verbum pro verbo, if necessary, at the expense of features natural to the target language. There is, however, no sharp boundary between functional and formal equivalence. On the contrary, they represent a spectrum of translation approaches. Each is used at various times and in various contexts by the same translator and at various points within the same text, sometimes simultaneously. Competent translation entails the judicious blending of functional and formal equivalence. Types of translation. Due to the continuing evolvement of the translation industry, there are now certain terms used to define specialist translations that do not fall under a general category. This brief guide offers an explanation of some of the more common translation terms used. Administrative translation. Although administrative has a very broad meaning, in terms of translation, it refers to common text used within businesses and organizations that are used in a day-to-day management. It can also be stretched to cover texts with similar functions in government. Commercial translation. Commercial translation or business translation covers any sort of document used in the business world, such as correspondence, company accounts, tender documents, reports, etc. Commercial translations require specialist translators with knowledge of terminology used in the business world. Computer translation, not to be confused with CAT, computer assisted translations, which refer to translations carried out by software. Computer translation is the translation of anything to do with computers, such as software, manuals, help files, etc. Economic translation. Similar to commercial or business translation, economic translation is simply a more specific term used for the translation of documents relating to the field of economics. Such texts are usually a lot more academic in nature. Financial translation. Financial translation is the translation of texts of a financial nature. Anything from banking to asset management to stocks and bonds could be covered. General translation. General translation is the simplest of translations. A general text means that the language used is not high level and to a certain extent could be in layman's term. There is no specific or technical terminology used. Most translations carried out fall under this category. Legal translation. Legal translations are one of the trickiest translations known. At its simplest level, it means the translation of legal documents such as statutes, contracts and treaties. A legal translation will always need specialist attention. This is because law is culture dependent and requires a translator with an excellent understanding of both the source and target cultures. Most translation agencies would only ever use professional legal to undertake such work. This is because there is no real margin for error. The mistranslation of a passage in a contract could, for example, have disastrous consequences. When translating a text within the field of law, the translator should keep the following in mind. The legal system of the source text is structured in a way that suits that culture, and this is reflected in the legal language. Similarly, the target text is to be read by someone who is familiar with another legal system and its language. Literary translation. A literary translation is a translation of literature such as novels, poems, plays and poems. The translation of literary works is considered by many one of the highest forms of translation, as it involves so much more than simply translating text. A literary translator must be capable of also translating feelings, culture nuances, humor and other subtle elements of a piece of work. Some go as far as to say that literary translations are not really possible. In 1959, the Russian-born linguist Roman Jakobson went as far as to declare that poetry by definition was untranslatable. In 1974, the American poet James Merrill wrote a poem, Lost in Translation, which in part explores this subject. Medical translation. A medical translation will cover anything from the medical field, from the packaging of medicine to manuals for medical equipments to medical books. Like legal translation, medical translation is specialization where a mistranslation can have grave consequences. Technical translation. Technical translation has a broad meaning. It usually refers to certain fields such as IT or manufacturing and deals with texts such as manuals and instructions. Technical translations are usually more expensive than general translations as they contain a high amount of terminology that only a specialist translator could deal with. Translation and style. To translate, one must have a style of his own, for otherwise the translation will have no rhythm or nuance, which come from the process of artistically thinking through and molding the sentences. They cannot be reconstituted by piecemeal imitation. The problem of translation is to retreat to a simpler tenor of one's own style and creatively adjust this to one's author. Techniques of translation. The translators typically adopt two types of techniques, which are direct translation techniques. Direct translation techniques are used when structural and conceptual elements of the source language can be transposed into the target language. Direct translation techniques include borrowing, calque, literal translation. Borrowing. Borrowing is the taking of words directly from one language into another without translation. Many English words are borrowed into other languages. For example, software in the field of technology and funk in culture. English also borrows numerous words from other languages. Abattoir, cafe, pass and resume from French, hamburger and kindergarten from German, bandana, musk and sugar from Sanskrit. Borrowed words are often printed in italics when they are considered to be foreign. Calque. A calque or loan translation is a phrase borrowed from another language and translated literally word for word. You often see them in specialized or internationalized fields such as quality, assurance. Aseguramiento de calidad, assurance quality taken from English. Examples that have been absorbed into English include standpoint and beer garden from German Standpunkt and beer garden. Breakfast from French déjeuner, which now means lunch in Europe, but maintains the same meaning of breakfast in Quebec. Some calques can become widely accepted in the target language, such as standpoint, beer garden and breakfast, and Spanish peso mosca and Casablanca from English flyweight and White House. The meaning other calques can be rather obscure for most people, especially when they relate to specific vocations or subjects such as science and law. Solución de compromiso is a Spanish legal term taken from the English compromise solution, and although Spanish attorneys understand it, the meaning is not readily understood by the layman. An unsuccessful calque can be extremely unnatural and can cause unwanted humor, often interpreted as indicating the lack of expertise of the translator in the target language. Literary translation. A word-for-word translation can be used in some languages and not others dependent on the sentence structure. El equipo está trabajando para terminar. El informe would translate into English as, the team is working to finish the report. Sometimes it works and sometimes it does not. For example, the Spanish sentence above could not be translated into French or German using this technique because the French and German sentence structures are different. And because one sentence can be translated literally across languages does not mean that all sentences can be translated literally. El equipo experimentado está trabajando para terminar el informe translates into English as the experienced team is working to finish the report. Experienced and team are reversed. 2. Oblique translation techniques. Oblique translation techniques are used when the structural or conceptual elements of the source language cannot be directly translated without altering meaning or upsetting the grammatical and stylistics elements of the target language. Oblique translation techniques include transposition, modulation, reformulation, or equivalence, adaptation, compensation. Transportation. This is the process where parts of speech change their sequence when they are translated. Blue ball becomes boile bluey in French. It is in a sense of shift of word class. Grammatical structures are often different in different languages. He likes swimming translates as schwimmt gern in German. Transposition is often used when English and Spanish because of the preferred position of the verb in the sentence. English often has the verb near the beginning of a sentence. Spanish can have it closer to the end. This requires that the translator knows that it is possible to replace a word category in the target language without altering the meaning of the source text. For example, English hand knitted. Noun plus participle becomes Spanish tejido, a mano. Participle plus adverbial phrase. Modulation. Modulation consists of using a phrase that is different in the source and target languages to convey the same idea. Te lo dejo means literally I'll leave it to you, but translates better as you can have it. It changes the semantics and shifts the point of view of the source language. Through modulation, the translator generates a change in the point of view of the message without altering meaning and without generating a sense of awkwardness in the reader of the target text. It is often used within the same language. The expressions es fácil de extender, it is easy to understand, and no es complicado de entender, it is not complicated to understand, are examples of modulation. Although both convey the same meaning, it is easy to understand simply conveys easiness, whereas it is not complicated to understand implies a previous assumption of difficulty that we are denying by asserting it is not complicated to understand. This type of change of point of view in a message is what makes a reader say, yes, this is exactly how we say it in our language. Reformation or equivalence. Here you have to express something in a completely different way. For example, when translating idioms or advertising slogans. The process is creative but not always easy. Would you have translated the movie The Sound of Music into Spanish as La Novicia Rebelde, the rebellious novice in Latin America, or Sonora while Lagrima, smiles and tears in Spain? Adaptation. Adaptation occurs when something specific to one language culture is expressed in a totally different way that is familiar or appropriate to another language culture. It is a shift in a cultural environment. Should pinko, a Spanish restaurant menu dish, be translated as kebab in English? It involves changing the cultural reference when a situation in the source culture does not exist in the target culture. For example, France has Belgian jokes and England has Irish jokes. Compensation. In general terms, compensation can be used when something cannot be translated and the meaning that is lost is expressed somewhere else in the translated text. Peter Fawcett defines it as making good in one part of the text something that could not be translated in another. One example given by Fawcett is the problem of translating nuances of formality from languages that use forms such as Spanish informal tu and formal usted, French tu and voice, and German du and sei into English, which only has you and expresses degrees of formality in different ways. As Louis M. Haywood from the University of Cambridge puts it, we have to remember that translation is not just a movement between two languages, but also between two cultures. Cultural transposition is present in all translation as degrees of free textual adaptation departing from maximally literal translation and involves replacing items whose roots are in the source language culture with elements that are indigenous to the target language. The translator exercises a degree of choice in his or her use of indigenous features, and as a consequence, successful translation may depend on the translator's command of cultural assumptions in each language in which he or she works. Conclusion. Translation is not as easy as it sounds to be. Moreover, translation does not mean a simple word-for-word translation for correspondence between any two languages. It is not a mechanical process where each word is translated to the target language. Here are some factors that the translator should keep in mind at the time of translation. A competent translator shows the following attributes: a very good knowledge of the language written and spoken from which he is translating, the source language, an excellent command of the language into which he is translating, the target language, familiarity with the subject matter of the text being translated, a profound understanding of the etymological and idiomatic correlates between the two languages, a finely tuned sense of when to metaphrase, translate literally, and when to paraphrase so as to assure true rather than spurious equivalence between the source and target language texts. A competent translator is not only bilingual but bicultural. A language is not merely a collection of words and of rules of grammar and syntax for generating sentences, but also a vast interconnecting system of connotations and cultural references whose mastery, writes linguist Mario Pei, comes close to being a lifetime job. Thus, in this episode, we talked about the meaning, needs, significance, and purpose of translation. We also discussed the types, techniques of translation. The episode also highlighted the important factors which a translator has to take into consideration at the time of translation. That is all that we have for you for today. We hope you enjoyed this session. See you again. Till then, thank you and namaskar.